Welcome everybody, good afternoon. Thank you to Caroline and the datacenter.me team for setting up this virtual panel session. This afternoon's session is going to be on prefabricated modular data center builds. And to get things rolling, what I'd like to do is introduce all the panelists in turn, just to give a brief introduction for themselves, their company, and their area of interest in this subject. So Ian, if I can start with you, please. Go ahead and give us your very brief CV, please.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, hi, I'm Ian Francis of Norman Disney & Young. I head up the mission critical team in the NDY London office. I've been a design consultant for over 30 years and have specialised in data centres for the last 15. I've worked at NDY for 12 years and have developed good relationships with our clients, suppliers, and a number of main contractors. As we all know, construction is a team sport and everyone needs to use their expertise to meet the overall client requirements. From my side, it's listening to the client brief, providing them options, and developing schemes that are both efficient and resilient. Our designs also need to have an element of flexibility to allow for changes that sometimes do happen. As consultants, NDY do not control the equipment selection or how it's procured. So the use of modular or packaged plant rooms is often led by the contractor and sometimes the client. One of the key drivers for the use of modular plant rooms is program, but I certainly don't believe this is the only benefit. Personally, I'm not totally convinced that modular delivers all it promises, but I'm interested to hear what the others think.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Ian. Dan, moving on to yourself. Same again, please.
Yeah, okay. I'm Dan Mace. I'm the EVP for data centers for Bouygues Energies and Services. I have an electrical background from the petrochemical pharmaceutical industry originally, but for the last 10 years, I've been specialising in data centers. I'd like to give a quick, brief introduction to Bouygues, because for some reason, for a big company, not many people have heard of us. We're a family company, founded back by Francis Bouygues in 1952, and we're still currently led by his youngest grandson, Martin Bouygues. Bouygues Construction are a big multinational design and build contractor, which has a truly global reach, operating across 5 different continents and employing 56,000 local employees. We turn over around 12.5 billion euros through 8 different entities covering the entire supply chain. Although founded in France, where our offices are still in Versailles, 56% of our business is now outside of France. So kind of showing we're a truly global business. We form part of this group as the Energies and Services division. And what I'd call us is kind of, we're in charge of all the technical build. We operate across multidisciplines, the sectors ranging from power generation through to distribution networks, overhead power lines, feeding onto our kind of transport, utility infrastructure businesses, and then on to industry, where we sit our data center offering. And this is in the center and kind of the heart of our business. We also go further down that supply chain to our smart cities, smart commercial buildings, and finally to our connectivities and Wi-Fi operations. So kind of it gives us a true understanding and expertise of this kind of technical ecosystem that we're kind of living. Our DC operations are across EMEA and APAC, and with a global approach to all of our technical sectors, we can and do supply a truly local knowledge to any geographical position that our clients wish to operate in. With the backing also, I suppose, of a massive multinational, you know, in a group this size. We're complete turnkey offering, working in partnership with our clients for the kind of the whole life cycle of the project. And as a group, we have 25 years experience within the data center industry and have a high level of interest and experience within the modular building and the data center, in the data center builds. At present, we're deploying sites in the UK and France with a combination of modular prefab and containerized solution. And I would say, and very personally, I'm very pro this innovation and do strongly believe this is the way forward. And we're actively refining and improving this product as we evolve in this era.
Great, thanks very much, Dan. And finally, Paul, same from you, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Paul Henry, the regional director for Google. and I manage our data center infrastructure delivery for EMEA, so cover Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. My experience has been 40 years of managing engineering, procurement, construction projects around the world. My introduction to the data center side of the business was as a operations manager for Bechtel. We managed the initial deployment of Equinix pre-IPO, and that was a global build, so it included Europe, Asia, and the US. And since then, been primarily focused on mission critical, large scale infrastructure projects around the world before joining Google 2.5 years ago. And so it's a pleasure to be here. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion, really where we're headed as far as a business into the modularity side, and have a keen focus on that. So appreciate the opportunity, and back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you all of you for the introductions. My name is Mark Acton. I'm an independent consultant, and I seem to be covering a multitude of sins across the data center sector. So, but you're not here to listen to me. So let's crack on with the questions. Ian, I'm going to ask you the first question, if I may. Prefabricated and modular, not necessarily the same thing. What do you feel is the relationship between the two?
It's an interesting one, because when you speak about modular, you often think of a modular data center, but that's not what we're here to talk about. I don't believe we're talking about modules of prefabricated elements of plant that come together on site. So prefabricated off-site construction of elements of a building or a system, and it really only becomes modular where you get sections of that prefabrication that come together in larger plant rooms. So you might split a plant room down into 6 or 8 modules, and then bring those to site, bolt them all together. But that's the idea that I get from the modular prefabricated. So the one in the same. It's just the modular is the composite side of prefabrication that's off-site.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, is Bouygues approach to that sort of in line with Ian's thinking?
Yeah, it is very similar, and I agree with Ian. It's quite subjective, isn't it? You know, what we believe is prefab and what we believe is modular. You know, I like to keep things really simple, and my kind of perception on prefab is a whole built system that comes in and operates as a system. Whereas modular, and I always like to say it to me, it's Lego, and we build it in unique building blocks that then actually build up to form part of the greater building itself. And I see that actually there can be a mix and match of both in what we do, and including the containerized solution as well on top of that.
Yeah, indeed. No, that makes sense. And Paul, from your perspective or Google's perspective, do you do you fall in line with that broad definition?
No, so I would say we're probably taking it to another level. So we've always envisioned prefab where we would take and do a series of assemblies offsite, and to bring them on site to be integrated into a system. And currently our strategy is really around developing products that are modularized. And those products really are a standard unit that's completely assembled, and all the way to the to commissioning within the factory. So our interpretation now is really to develop a series of products that are modularized, that act as a complete system, where we can actually do the systemization commissioning within a controlled facility, and then ship that entire assembly onto site. And it's where we typically have a standard set of interfaces that we can use to plug that system into what now we look at as a data center is really the integration of a number of products that we bring into that assembly. And so it's a little bit, I think, a little bit of an evolution of the two previous views of prefab and modularization, but we're really trying to take it up a level. And I think the future view of that is really to bring advanced manufacturing techniques into how do we actually assemble modules. And that's much more in a manufacturing type environment. And obviously you have to have the scale to support it.
Yeah, and I guess, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, just really a question back to Paul there. In terms of the larger scale modules, are they truly standalone, or do they still need some sort of central infrastructure? Because that's where we see the cutoff between it being a modular data center, arrives like a Premier Inn, gets bolted all together, and that's it, everyone walks away. Or you get the modules like the containerized solutions that then need power, cooling, etc., back to central systems.
Yeah, and I would say we are taking those central systems, we're modularizing them. We're modularizing components of the data center, and so certain elements of it. And our intent is about 50% of what we would typically see in the job hours on a construction site would move into a manufacturing environment, but the other 50% would remain on site, really doing the infrastructure to support those modules coming onto the project.
That's interesting, actually. One thing I want to follow up on, I am going slightly off piece, but I'll come back to the thread, is do your modules actually incorporate the IT infrastructure as well? So you're building out, the cabinets and the components in the cabinets, as well as the physical.
They're fully integrated, and what I would say to a degree of being self-sustained, and really using distributive controls. So we'd actually have a PLC on the module that is pre-configured, is actually gone through level 3 commissioning, where it can come onto site for full integration.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And that's something we're working with here in London. Actually, a very similar thing where we are building traditional white box. Obviously, we don't do the rack and stack, Paul, that you guys do, but we form the original white box, and then actually we're bringing it in what we would call a 500 kilowatt module, which is completely autonomous to itself. Its PLC is already pre-mounted in there. It's been commissioned to, I always call it 2.5 because we've powered it up, but we always need final checks once we get on site. So, we may have even done the burn-in on some of the load components as well, off-site, depending on time restrictions of the area, and then bring those in and build out. So it's almost like, we build the white box and then we are just building modules all the way out. And absolutely right, Paul, the infrastructure is then modularized that then connect through those systems. And it's a combination of traditional build and modular construction.
I think on our side, we really are sort of focused on the M&E infrastructure as opposed to the white box. So we're not really into the modularization or prefabbing of white boxes. The rack space is very much down to a tenant at this stage still.
Do you see that as a development going forward, though, Ian? I mean, rather than just building the building, building the modular components that actually incorporate the IT, which is, after all, what a data center is all about. Do you see that as an evolving method of direction or direction of approach?
It's interesting in terms of if you're going for modular site, pre-configured, all racked out. It depends what the end user wants, and that certainly is outside of our control. We are designing and building for generally open plan white space still. There are some schemes out there that we've looked at and have been involved in, which are modular, containerized, and they've been pushed into the warehouse building, and we've provided power, cooling, and comms to those. But that is a little bit unusual for us at the moment. We are really focusing on the white space and supporting that in a resilient and efficient manner.
Okay, great, thank you. So Dan, for you, so other than potential improvement on delivery timescales, etc., what are the true advantages of the modular prefab over let's say more traditional builds? Where do you see that?
I think straight away, I mean, the first one is health and safety. Looking at the peak numbers that we get on site in our construction, on I don't know, let's say we're doing a 20 meg handover, you know, we could be looking at peaking at 600-700 on site at the peak of it. If I can remove 100 to 150 people and put them in a different geographical position, then that's instantly an improvement in what we're doing, especially in this new COVID world that we're living in, where, you know, we found that, you know, we need to have work in a very different way. Mm-hmm. So actually, I think this innovation is definitely a way forward with health and safety with COVID. Mm-hmm. I think quality, it's just, the quality is immensely better. You're taking a product that would be built on site and in a very controlled manner within a very controlled area, mm-hmm. but actually you're taking it into a manufacturing facility, and actually you're bringing a manufacturing quality to that particular product, which again, as Paul touched on, the fact that we can commission it to level 3, 2.5 as we're in at the site itself before deploying, removes a lot of the bugs, and actually we're getting a quality product that comes to site that's repeatable and has been designed in a specific way to make it a lot more maintainable. I think. Okay. So finally, I think the scalability as well. Sorry, Paul. No. Just because I think that, you know, the demands on the data center industry have gone through the roof recently, and we can see everything that was supposed to be 5 years out coming into the next 2-3 years. If we've got teams working in a single geographical position, I'm not locking that team out there and I can't use them for multiple projects. I can get more output by putting these teams in a single area, producing these modules for multiple DCs than we can putting them and geographically landlocking them in a specific area. And I think that's important to see as well, the output as well we get.
And presumably consistency of well, product ultimately is, I guess, a big part of that.
Yeah, exactly that. And you know, always in my little mind, I always think that if we could have a standardized building block for a specific client that they could deploy anywhere across the globe to any one of their data centers, then it gives not only us the repeatability, but it gives our client the agility that they need in this world when suddenly they've got to boost up by, you know, 20 megawatts, 100 megawatts in a certain area.
Yeah, there's a certainty around it.
Yeah.
And Paul, I guess, you know, Google must be sort of endorsing some of those ideas. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that in terms of where you see the benefits within your organization?
Yeah, so obviously safety and quality. So I agree with what Dan just said. But I think for us, we're also looking at, and the whole key to this is standardization. Mm-hmm. And so we've really moved from where we were on the cutting edge of innovation and changing our data centers as new ideas came through. We're being much more disciplined on standard configuration with standard set of module and products that feed into that. And so to achieve what we want to see as the results of that is being able then to put standardized products into a manufacturing type facility and get the repeatability out of it, not only you know, safety and quality, but cost and schedule efficiency to play into this. Yeah. And you know, what we've been looking at is the construction industry as far as productivity improvements have improved very little over the past 100 years, where when we compare that to the manufacturing industry, I think it's something like 800% improvement of productivity in a manufacturing setting. Yeah. So really taking some of the traditional things that we've done in the field as construction, putting it into a manufacturing setting, and being able to repeat that time and time again will enable scalability, but also be able to improve cost and schedule performance for manufacturing these facilities.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So it's not just about cost. There are other factors involved too, I guess.
Yeah.
So sorry, go on, Paul.
No, it's just it's really the whole mix, and it's kind of all the key metrics we track on a construction project's cost, schedule, safety, and quality. And I think it also de-risks a number of the things that we're faced with in the site. You know, whether it's weather, labor, sure. Those are always risks that you're facing while constructing in the field, where in a manufacturing facility, you control that much better.
Interesting, yeah. And so, Ian, I mean, both Dan and Paul have talked about, you know, the multiple factors that come to bear when making a decision to go in this direction. You know, clearly cost is not the only factor, but I think a lot of people perceive modular prefab or make the choice on modular prefab on cost alone. You know, they believe that it's cheaper and therefore they should be going that direction without necessarily taking into account the other factors. Is that something you see, or is that something that you know, you'd counter?
Yeah, interesting. We don't get too involved in the analysing the costs in this, but from what I know, I don't believe it is cheaper. I think in the first instance it can be more expensive if you get to standardisation and you rolling things out. Yes, there is certainly economy in scale, but if you're doing them for a single project, I think there are extra costs associated with it because you're having to build the modules in the first place, all the steelwork associated with that, all the transportation costs. You've got double transportation because you're getting all these key items of equipment, transporting those to the manufacturer, all assembled, and then you've got the cost of specialist haulage of getting quite large modules down to site and logistics of getting them into site, which all cost money. So therefore, there are some adds in terms of cost. Just going back to the previous questions slightly, in design terms, I think there is a de-risking there, and there is a benefit of ironing everything out in the factory, and get the chance to go and almost do all the snagging in the factory, do it once, that's it, we want the same thing again. It irons out any issues on coordination as well. I know myself and Dan have had many conversations on coordination, so if it helps out now, that's good for both of us.
And so I guess, Dan, you know, you'd reinforce that premise that it's not just about cost, is it? You know, there's a great deal more to consider, and I think people who are just looking at it from a pure cost perspective are probably missing the point.
Yeah, no, there's so many more benefits to it, and you know, yes, as Ian said, there is an additional component to it. You know, you have to build a steel structure that these modules are going to sit in. So, you know, let's just materials is there, but it's an equation. You add that, but then you look at your productivity that you're getting by building, and actually you're looking at how many different projects you can work out across there. So I think there's, as Ian said, there's pluses and minuses, but on the whole, to me, the benefits that we see within the modular builds are well worth, you know, the commitment we are making as a company, and I think as we all are, to this solution. And also it is going to be one of the only ways that we can keep up with this ever-growing market that we seem to be in at the moment.
The increasing demand, certainly. Paul, you know, a challenging question for you perhaps, but do you see any downsides to sort of modular prefab that people should be aware of? So, you know, it all sounds like a fantastic proposition, but you know, things are never quite that simple, are they? So are there any pitfalls that people should be looking out for, anything they should be aware of before they go into this sort of area?
Yeah, I think the downsides are really the opposite of some of the tenets I said that really enable modularization. So if you are changing, there's a downside to it. You know, having a large volume of change in your design and requirements really takes away from the benefit of being able to manufacture and scale that production. So,
Sure.
so I'd say change is something that we have to resist. You need to have scale with it. So a downside is if you don't have scale and you are doing these on one-off, hard to reap the benefit of doing multiple production. And I think also if you're committed to modularization and the production that goes with that, is if you're looking at sites that are heavily restrictive, it doesn't provide you necessarily the flexibility you may need to incorporate the modules. You're limited on the configuration. Sure. So there are some downsides. It really kind of influences what you look at as far as usable sites. And so those are all things that we consider that play into this. So, you know, we really look at standardization, how to get the right sites to fit a standard configuration. We do have some flexibility within those configurations, but we don't want to be changing the design of the modules per se.
Sure. And I mean, you know, Ian mentioned transport. So would there be certain geographies or even countries that might be more problematic for this approach? I mean, you know, is it a question of picking and choosing the sites very much and making sure the site's appropriate as well?
It is. And you know, we have quite a robust logistics team that even today looks at all of our heavy shipments that we do. So the gen sets and bringing them into sites are comparable because those are quite large and take quite a bit of planning to be able to land them onto the project. And we use all sorts of means. We ship via sea and water. We truck transport. We use rail. So we really use all aspects of transportation to get them to the site and land it in the facility. Great,
thank you. Ian, back to you. We've talked about some of the benefits. We talked about the the potential changing approach. Are your customers, people you're talking to, certainly from an advisory perspective, are they changing in their attitudes? Is this something that they consider as an option? Is it a direction we're moving in, or are people resistant to that change?
I think we're moving in that direction slowly. Obviously, we're probably operating in a different scale to Paul in terms of we're not approaching it to get standardization, because there is constant evolution in what we are designing. I think the benefits of a program, certainly, yes, if we can use those where we're developing a site. And one sort of case in point is if you've got a base build being constructed that's not set to receive plant, you can have all that plant all constructed, prefabricated off site. As soon as you get the keys, that can start to roll in. Those sort of things are great in terms of benefits of program, certainty of cost. But I think until we sort of get into that process of doing this on a regular basis for many clients, there still will be this sort of decision of if it suits the job, yes, we'll go down the prefabricated route. If it doesn't, we'll stick to a traditional build. And as I said in my introduction, a lot of this is led by the contractors who get involved in procuring and installing. The actual design, the basis doesn't really change. It really is about how it's assembled, how it's installed. I think the testing and commissioning is an interesting one. Paul and Dan spoke about doing level 3s. Almost, it's the case of one thing I think we've come across is having to do double testing. So you're testing in the factory, and if it does get split down to modules, then you reassemble it, you're into testing again. And even in the modules themselves, you do need to go in and check cable joints again. So there is sort of a bit of doubling up of testing there, which is absolutely essential. But that's a bit of a downside of having the prefabricated build.
Yeah, and Dan, how do you approach that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it's about how you set out your testing, and it's about how you design your autonomous block. And the idea would be is that the components you have in your, let's just say, a 500 kilowatt building block would be, let's just say, your input panels, your output panels, your UPSs, and your cooling. Now you try and section that into that kind of building block. At that point, what we can do then is we can commission that all in one, and we can get to, like I say, I call it level 2.5, because there is, as Ian rightly said, there's a slight overlap. But actually, all of our polarity testing, all of our burning, all of our phase rotation, and actually our UPS commissioning before we get battery autonomy onto them can all be done up front. Then it's down to the transport. We need to be putting these on anti-vibe mounts. We need to be on air bed lorries. And actually, that's when we sometimes see the restriction of bridges, obviously, because with the bridges in the UK are 5.5 meters high. So I know I can only get a 4.5 meter module down there. It's there. So all those considerations are done. But actually, I don't think it's abortive work that we're doing. It's work to make sure the quality is there when we arrive.
Sure.
And actually, it's work that actually, because of the way that the shell and core is being constructed, is being done well within those timelines. And on the day that concrete goes green on the top of that first floor, we're then pushing those modules straight under. And I think those advantages, and again, like I say, with the scalability and also the way that we can spread our workforce as well, just outweigh any small abortive work or additional cost of a frame.
Interesting, yeah. And so the other question I was going to ask you actually, Dan, was really around, you know, you can obviously schedule the builds in the factories of the module itself. But what about the infrastructure items? You know, you said yourself there's a huge demand on data centers at the moment, and we all know that supply lines are getting a little bit stretched, you know, particularly because of the virus, etc. But you know, we've got some pretty long lead items. It might be switchgear, it might be UPSs, it might be gensets. How do you accommodate that in the schedule, and you know, maybe avoid them negating some of the benefits you might see on the modular side?
I think for starters, I think the relationships with our supply chain has changed. You know, gone are the days of the GC beating up his subcontractors. You know, these are our partners. These are our partners. These are people we work with every day, and we have strong partnership relationships. And it's not only that; it's from the supply chain to us as the GC, but also to our clients and their end users. Everyone is now connected, going in the same direction, and that means that we're all talking. That means everyone's got the same agenda to go forward. So actually the planning side of it and the actually upfront knowing what's going on with our supply chain means that we can mitigate any long leads on it. I think with regards to what we do, you know, the longest single supply we generally see is generators, you know, 24, 25 weeks, depending on, you know, what particular brand you want and what particular box you want it put into, you know, whether it be, you know, belly tanks or not belly tanks. But I think once you then start to get into your chillers and your UPSs, we're in this kind of a 16-week kind of boundary.
Okay.
With a shell and core construction sits very easily into that kind of part.
Okay. Good, thank you. And Paul, something that I wanted to pick up on that you mentioned earlier, you mentioned benefits potentially on the operational side, such as maintenance. You know, what do you see? How does that apply? How is that sort of maintenance benefit manifest itself? And are there other life cycle benefits above and beyond that? You know, from an operational sense.
Yeah, so I think, you know, all the way through the life cycle, when you're dealing with standard modules and you're using a consistent design with a consistent set of components within that, we're actually looking at everything from a prescriptive work package to how that's installed, to a prescriptive maintenance package to how we maintain those modules. Sure. And so you can do that much more consistently if you keep those product modules the same from site to site to site. And as you train people, you're training them around that same module. So the ability to move people from site to site, both in the construction side of it as well as the operation side, is much more fluid to do that. Because they're dealing with, you know, seeing the same install or the same maintenance package that they need to follow. And I'd say, in addition, also spare parts. You're able to keep spare parts across multiple sites and use them interchangeably where you need them. So the consistency, standardization into the modules is paramount. I also see that we're engineering better maintenance accessibility into the modules than necessarily we were doing when we did each site separately and differently. We just didn't have the same control around it. So those are some of the benefits that I see in it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's very easy to talk about, you know, design and build for maintenance, but the reality is, unless you've got a very consistent product, that's pretty difficult to do. So that makes perfect sense. And I guess you've also got an increasing cost certainty when it comes to your maintenance providers. You know, you know what to expect and you know what's going to happen, I guess.
It's all the way up the supply chain. So what it enables us to do, traditionally we would wait until we actually cited a configuration at a building site, and then we would do the procurements. What we're now doing is actually making the commitments to the modules, and those modules are not necessarily cited yet. So we can lock in the entire supply chain to feed into that module, develop the module, and make the decision actually where we're going to place those very late in the game from when we traditionally have done it. So it shortens the construction schedule, makes our commitment as to which sites we're actually going to build a shorter, gives us more lead time on that. So we can make those decisions later in the game, which is actually a big benefit to us.
Yeah, and I imagine the site mobilization becomes much quicker as well. You know, you're presumably immediately into production pretty much after commissioning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
I think, but as Dan said, it requires what I would say, really partnering with our partner teams, the supply chain, making sure that we're being transparent. We're working this in an open collaborative environment. We're working what our demand is and how we set up the production cycles on it. And that takes a lot of pre-planning, a lot of coordination, a lot of information flow. But that really is how we're enabling the success, is spending that time on the front end to get it right.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's a really good answer. Dan, I'm going to come back to you for another question, kind of on similar lines, but not quite the same. Are there potential environmental benefits from modular prefab? You know, at the moment we're all talking about, you know, decarbonisation, going green, and you know, we're touching on that quite a lot, and certainly I know Google are doing a lot in that area. But does this offer an advantage, you know, to that approach?
I think the raw materials are always going to be the same, whether we're building traditional or we're building modular. But and I know Ian was talking about transportation. Actually, depending on where you site your build facility, you can reduce the transport needed for these particular parts by a serious amount. And actually, you know, we can, you know, if we site it, you know, in a particular warehouse, because the thing is, it's acreage that we need. We need acreage to put all these modules down. We need a big facility to build these.
Obviously, yeah.
Okay, now, you know, I know we get pop-up shops, but actually, do you know what? A pop-up module building facility in the right position, say next to the switchgear manufacturer, is where no, but it is. And then literally you are building the switchgear in there. You can ship the UPSs in from wherever they are. And actually things are taking then one lorry trip down or up or across to the sea to actually do it. So I think we can reduce the amount of transportation needed. Are we truly making an impact on the environment? We're doing a bit.
Is it something you try and measure?
We measure, our metrics tend to be measured. We do measure in our transport routes. We obviously measure in our wastage, in our waste disposal, and things like that. And obviously, I suppose if you are manufacturing and directly mounting a lot of your components, you're not packing them. So yes, we are reducing the packaging. We are, but you know, it's small gains. But I suppose lots of small gains all add up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just add to Dan's kind of from a sustainability standpoint, and he touched on it, is that there are a couple of advantages with the reduced labor force on site. You really taper off this kind of boom and bust of, you know, big construction organization and teams coming in 1,000 plus onto a site, and then all of a sudden when the project's finished, they all go away. So you taper that a bit. There's less impact as a result of that, you know, not having all those folks coming in typically as travelers and then leaving again. And then I think, secondly, you're moving that labor into a much more controlled environment, into a type of a manufacturing facility where it's sustainable and kind of long-term jobs. So it flattens that employment, creates job stimulation in markets where those facilities are located. And so there is that additional benefit.
Yeah, difficult to quantify, but it's definitely there, isn't it? Yeah.
I think on the material side as well, there must be a reduction in the wastage in terms of and damage to equipment that always seems to happen on site. So you are cutting out the wastage, the sort of inefficiencies of working on site. So there's a benefit there.
Yeah, makes sense. And do you think if someone were to be going through a LEED or BREEAM assessment, do you think the modular prefab would sort of add into that, Ian? Do you think that would be an advantage?
I think it will. How you measure it, I'm not exactly
That's
sure.
what I'm thinking.
A lot of it is down to the end product, but there is a thing in terms of wastage, in terms of travel. But I'm not quite sure how you'd measure that. I mean, there must be our BREEAM experts on that.
Yeah, there must be an advantage, and that's kind of why I asked Dan whether you know, you're measuring it and trying to sort of quantify it in some way, because there must be an advantage, I guess, but difficult to pin it down.
It's more about the built environment than actually the build. there is an element, but not so much.
Yeah. Okay. So we are sort of approaching the end of the session, but I'm going to ask you one final question, which has a certain degree of humor in it, and I hope your answers will reflect it. But one of the first things I thought about when this subject was brought up was how do we actually differentiate to people out there the difference between containerized and modular and prefab? You know, I think there's unfortunately a perception out there. Every time we start talking about modular, people think of a container. People think of an ISO container that ships on the back of a lorry, and there we are. And it's actually quite a common perception. So how do we change that perception? How do we actually finally get people to realize that containers, yes, absolutely have a place, and they can work. They're probably pretty niche in terms of what they do, but you know, it's not the same at all as a modular or certainly a prefab. Ian, I'm going to go back to you on this one.
The sort of the semantics thing is modules as opposed to modular. But then it depends what you put after the modular. You can make it a modular data center. You can make it a modular plant room. So you can call it lots of different things. So at the end of the day, it's what you get. So it's a case of, am I building a modular room, a modular data center? As Paul was saying, they are building modular data centers or modular rooms to go into data centers, but it's still prefabricated. It's still made up of modules. So they're one and the same, really. It's down to what your favorite terminology is.
I think it's this sort of idea. It's an ISO container, and one of the things I talk about is it's a container-sized module. It's not a container. I don't know if Dan you'd agree with that.
Shall we?
It's a box.
Yeah. I think I agree. I think, you know, there's always a blurred line between modular and prefabricated. Yeah. But I think my clear line is that generators come in containers.
I've seen switchgear in containers as well. Trust me. You're right.
Yes, I think it's perception, and you know, it's very subjective, but it's there is a definite difference between the two, and I think our clients now are more than educated enough to understand that.
Yeah. Your clients are not sure everybody's clients are. Paul, from you on.
Say, I mean, we've already touched on it. This is a bit of a journey, right? So, and I think the fact that we have put assemblies into containers, you know, set a preconception of people of what modularization is. But we've come a long way from that, and I think the industry has also. And this is really a journey that we're all on as an industry, and I think it's, you know, disruptive in some places and categories of the business, but it's something we really need everybody working towards, because we as Google individually can't, you know, change the industry. It really takes everybody kind of rowing in the same direction, and we will get there and define what modular is for the future.
Absolutely, great answer. Thank you. So final comment from all of you. I'll give each of you, you know, a minute, 30 seconds possibly, just to wrap up, and then I think we're pretty much we're done for the session. So Paul, if you'd like to kick off in reverse order to the start.
Okay, so I think great discussion. It provokes a lot of thought on what this is, how does it get fully integrated onto the site, where are the right applications, and really encourage everybody to start thinking along these lines, and hopefully in the Q&A session we'll get some good provocative questions thrown at us, so we can start to think about how we push this agenda forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I agree with Paul. It's been great to discuss, and it's always, you know, provocative just to talk about these different subjects. But as Bouygues, you know, we firmly believe in this technology. We firmly believe in this innovation, and we're confident that this is the way forward. We don't believe that the industry is there yet with this. We've not reached the kind of the alpha kind of level that we need to be at. We're still in that beta version at the moment, but we believe we're going the right direction, and it won't be far away before we actually get this there, and it will become standard practice to build our data centers in this way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dan. And Ian, finally?
Yeah, I think from our side as a designer, if you can get things standardized, get them designed, see them in production, make the adjustments, hone them in, optimize them, that is the way ahead. There is still the issue of it's horses for courses. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. It depends on the client's needs, but certainly there is a big future in modularized or modular plant rooms.
Thanks very much, everybody. We are pretty much out of time now, so thanks very much for your participation, if I can say it. Thanks also to everybody listening. Good to have your company, thank you. And thank you to Data Center Me for hosting the event. We are now going to be open for questions, which I believe are coming in, and we'll all be available to take those questions as they come in. But again, for this particular piece of the session, thank you very much for your participation. Thanks to the panelists, and we'll be talking on the question sign. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you.